Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm Patricia Hanbich, your horticulturist, also known by my oldest, dearest friends as Patty Plant. And I would like to share with you a little bit about your front yard tonight. So my good friend Sherry asked last week if maybe we could talk a little bit about what to do with your front yard if you wanted it to be more useful, definitely still attractive, because it is your first impression to people that are coming to visit you or driving by or that kind of thing. So it's really important that it is something that suits you and suits your landscape and all those kind of things. But as Sherry said, I'd like to maybe grow some food out there. And I mean, edibles are a great part of the landscape. And whether it's your front yard, your backyard, your patio, your balcony, whatever it is, taking the time to think about what you're sustainably doing with your space is something that's really, really important. So thanks, Sherry, for this great idea. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, because when I share workshops or training sessions with people, quite often there's a hands-on approach or something that really shows what the academia or the subject matter of the lesson is. And so I'm always looking at different landscapes and yards, backyards, front yards. You know, I walk the dog down the alley, and what do? Is like, well, look and see what's happening through the fence. So, I mean, it's all wonderful things that we do. So thanks, Sherry, for asking to have this done. So what about your front yard? I mean, typically in urban areas, our front yards are really not used for anything. It's a public area. We definitely don't want to be out there, you know, doing our gardening in a tank top and shorts or even less. And so, you know, it is something to think about. But largely, if you think about the landscapes that we have, let's look at urban first. So in an urban landscape, you've got your house, you've got some space in the front, and you've got some space in the back. And from a landscape perspective, it's really important to think about those different spaces. So in a landscape, there's a public area, a private area, and a service area. So the public area is where the mailman comes, or people come and knock on your door and ask for donations, or whatever it is. The private area is where you hang out. So that's where you barbecue and you entertain family and friends, and maybe you have your private space where you like to have a cup of tea, maybe read a book, those kind of things. The service area is where maybe your compost is, maybe it's where your garden is, your edible garden. Maybe it's where you store things. You know, so those three areas are not necessarily set in stone. And what I generally see is that the front yard is largely neglected. In fact, I hate to say this, but quite often the front yard is really kind of boring and really doesn't do much. In a rural landscape, the front yard may be larger or smaller, but again, it sometimes isn't really utilized as space that is really useful. So regardless of where you are, whether you're rural, whether you're urban, whether you live in a condo, in an apartment, that front yard or that space where people first come to see you is largely important and should really be utilized. If you think about the perspective of sustainability and utilizing your space appropriately, it's kind of important to think about that space, that public area that usually just has some turf, maybe not be really good turf, maybe great turf, depending on, you know, how important your lawn is. But what if you wanted to change that space into something a little different? Maybe something a little more sustainable, maybe something that actually not necessarily pays for itself, but makes you feel like you're actually using that space appropriately. So let's look at our typical front area in an urban lot. or a rural lawn, it doesn't really matter. Usually consists of some shrubs, some trees, maybe some annuals, perennials, maybe, I don't know, usually some lawn. So if you wanted to renovate that space, if you wanted to make it more useful, how do you go about doing that? Now, sorry, I just have this indoor tropical background behind us, and pretty soon the snow will go and spring will be kind of here, and we can do a lot of these sessions together outside where I can actually show you what's happening, but not yet. So if you think of a typical front yard, there's some lawn, there might be some tree and shrub or mixed borders, and that's about it. So what if you wanted to convert that space to growing something useful, maybe something edible, something that resonates with what you and your family or whomever lives with you could enjoy? Well, let's look at turf. Turf is largely a part of the landscape that is not sustainable in nature at all, because turf takes a lot of water, a lot of nutrients, a lot of care, and we often don't utilize those lawn or turf areas for anything other than being there. You know, I always say to people, you know, how much lawn do you have, and how important is that lawn, and is it healthy? Does it look beautiful? Because turf is a type of environment that if it's healthy, no weeds are going to grow there. So if you've got dandelions or any sorts of things growing in your lawn area, well, you probably aren't giving it the care it needs, because a turf environment or a lawn environment is actually able to be so competitive that weeds can't grow. So, you know, where I live now, there isn't a lot of aesthetic treatment of weeds. So the dandelions especially are very prevalent in our park areas. And I tell you, every little head of a dandelion, even though they're quite a beautiful flower, spreads a lot of seeds. So if you think of that, if your lawn isn't really in good shape, those seeds that are just floating around can often become your weed. And if you aren't interested in hanging out on your lawn, laying on it, walking in your bare feet, maybe it's not a good thing to have growing in your landscape. Why not grow something useful? Put it into shrubs and perennials, or better yet, how about an urban garden? So how do we get rid of that turf? If you want to get rid of the turf in the most sustainable fashion, you want to keep that plant material and roots and all those other great soil amendments dead, but you want to keep them in your landscape. So, I mean, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can use a pesticide like glyphosate or Roundup, and you can spray your lawn area. It'll take quite a lot of weeks to die, and then just rototill it into your new beds. But sometimes that's not the best approach. If you want a totally more green option that will work in the prairies where it's not very hot and not very humid, which means that things aren't going to rot very quickly, then the best thing to do is rent a turf lifter. And you can do that from any of the rented stores. You want to ensure you water your lawn 24 hours before you lift the turf. Set the turf lifter, and it's just a little machine you walk behind, and it lifts the turf, and you want to take those rolls of sod and turn them over so the roots are exposed, and let them bake in the sun. Lots of people use all sorts of different methods to do this. Sometimes people say, well, the lasagna gardening, and you can see tarps, and you can see all sorts of ways that people are trying to basically cook the plant material underneath so that it's not alive. But in our climate, it's not really that successful. So if you really want to do a truly sustainable thing, rent a turf lifter, cut the grass off below where the root tissue is. So if your lawn is not healthy, and I'm saying that healthy from a perspective of a perfect lawn, then you kind of want to gauge the depth of where you lift that turf or cut the turf to below the root zone if possible. Cut it, flip it over, hope for some really, really hot weather, and let it die. Once it is totally dead, because lawn can be an insidious weed in itself if you want to be growing some edibles in your landscape that used to be lawn. So it's really important to make sure it's dead, but then just to cultivate or rototill that nice turf material into the ground is adding a lot of beautiful amendments that will make your soil better able to withstand production. So once you've done that, it's dead, rototill it in. And why we're talking about this now is because even though it's March, May is going to come pretty quickly. And the best thing to do is to prepare and plan for things so that you're not leaving yourself short of time and you can actually enjoy the growing season to its utmost. And in this case, if you want to grow food, you want to have the longest season possible. So rototill it in, amend that soil if you need to, if it's not healthy, because quite often under lawn areas in our landscape, we haven't taken the time to amend the soil. We haven't taken the time to make sure that it's really able to withstand plant life. So you want to amend the soil. You do want to fertilize. And I mean, from a fertilization perspective, plants don't know the difference between organic and inorganic, but it's all what your personal preference is and what you want to do to fertilize. An all-purpose fertilizer with all the micronutrients like 20-20-20 with all the other little tiny little bits of nutrients that plant need is the best thing to do to get a nice fruitful soil that is able to withstand plant growth. Then of course comes the time to plant. And I mean, in the old days, what did people do when they first broke the land? Well, they planted potatoes. And I mean, the lowly potato is actually a beautiful plant and does produce a lot of wonderful food that we can utilize not only right now, but in the future. So, I mean, it's a big seed when you plant it. So if your soil isn't perfect, it can still kind of work its way through. So, I mean, if you're thinking of converting some areas in your landscape into being more useful and producing food, think about what it is that you like to eat. Think about how experienced you are as a gardener, and let's try to set some achievable goals, because goals that aren't achievable are just disappointing. So we want to make sure that, we're setting ourselves up for success and not failure. So I think that the next few videos will be about production, starting seeds and getting things going. So, stay tuned once a week on Orchid Horticulture. Any time of the day or night, you can catch me on my YouTube channel, Grow. And, it's all about sharing information and ensuring that we have the knowledge and the skills to be able to do what we want to do with each and every moment of our lives. So I hope that I've given you a little bit of knowledge. We will revisit this topic because I do want to share some good knowledge that will allow us to be more sustainable and be more food secure and be able to produce good food wherever we are living, regardless of whether we have, a huge holding with lots of acres, an urban lot, or even just a balcony. So thank you for joining me. I had to do this tonight because I just got a haircut. So thanks, Patty. Patty Shabaga is my wonderful hairdresser that has curly hair too. So it's a wonderful thing. I hope that wherever you are healthy, you're staying safe, you're happy, and you're doing all sorts of growing and green things. So thank you for joining me. My name is Patricia Hanbidge, also known as Patty Plant. I do thank you for joining me. I hope that everything is well in your life, and we'll see you next time. Be happy, stay safe, and let's get growing, folks. Bye now.